So today's topic, the design consideration. You already watched the construction process from schematic design to the complete project from OG house. What is the design consideration when you start project? I would like to introduce your design consideration when you are in architecture school first. So in architecture school, you already spent 1 year in architecture program. So in architecture design, in architecture program, we have to be followed NAB criteria, which is the National Architecture Accrediting Voting. It shows the minimum requirement for professional education in architecture. So it means we have to be consider about these two area. Area one, critical think and representation. How you think about the architecture and how you understanding about the city and urban, or how you understanding about the landscape, and how you represent this side here. This is area A. This is mostly performed from your studio. The area B is more about integrated building practice and technical skill and knowledge. You're learning about how you actually construct your project and how you actually understanding about your building and how you follow the actual code and regulation and zoning. And also building practice is more about what is about your business mind when you perform and when you practice your design form. So integral building practice is more about you learning from the pro practice class, but technical skill and knowledge you mostly obtain from the site tech class. Okay, so architects are called upon to comprehend the technical aspect of design, system, and material, and be able to apply the comprehend to their services. So architect is not just single area. Architect have to be understanding area A, which is critical thinking and representation, and area B, and how you actually realize your project in the real world. You have to be learning the both sides to be an architect. Okay, so mostly studio you are really great at some critical thinking and representation, but site tag and pro practice we have to understanding how you actually realize the project better. Okay, then let's talk about what is about the work of the design professional. What is about the major consideration when you process the project in practical field? This is the most common consideration in design field. So there's a 5 consideration I summarized to understanding and to be an actual professional designer to realize your project. First one, you have to be know about the zoning regulation, and then you have to be know the building code, which is IBC, and you have to be understanding about accessibility. It's a part of the building code, and also understanding about the trade and professional standard. What kind of a standard you have to be keeping for your design professional, and then construction information. What kind of construction information you have to provide to realize your project. So first one, let's talk about the zoning regulation. So what is about the zoning? So you guys all know about the zoning, right? What is about the zoning regulation? What is different between the IBC, building code, and zoning? So zoning is more related to the city or neighbors. Because you're making a better balance with the city and a better balance with the neighbor, you have to be keeping the certain principle, okay? Because if your neighbor only build around 3 street or 5 street, or if you want to build around 100 street building, it's not allowed from the zoning, right? So zoning is more about to making the better city, the balance with the context, balance with the neighbors, okay? So this is all about the zoning regulation. So zoning regulation may regulate lot size, the placement, the bulk size, and height of the structure. What about the setback, which is what is about the distance basically from the front property line or side property line or backyard property line. So your building cannot build beyond, you cannot build on the property line. We have to be certain setback, because in the making a setback, we can actually make the buffer zone between the public with the city owned the place and then your property. You have to be about buffer zone. This buffer zone can make for the public space, or public and private space can share this space as well. If you're designing about your project in a city, you also follow the parking requirement, how many parking you have to provide, and also bicycle requirement, how many bicycle parking you have to provide. This is depending on the city, it has a little bit different number requirement. And then building height and area, as you know, bulk size, how much building you can build basically from your zoning, okay? And then they have a lot of some fire district requirement. It has all different depending on the city, okay? I bring another video to introducing about the zoning regulation. It's very well introducing about the zoning through this video, understanding better what is about your concept about the zoning, and then why we need a zoning, okay? Let's watch this video and then we can jump into the next topic.
Zoning. It means a type of atmosphere.
The generalization of different counties and sorting out the towns.
Planning the area around and see what new developments will go around town.
From a practical thing, it seems kind of fictional because it seems like mostly we create zones and then we have special exceptions in order to override the zones.
We want to bring commercial and residential to one zoning area, where all people can enjoy and appreciate the commercial as well as resident, as long as we had a mutual respect, because that's what neighborhood is all about, commercial and residential zoning.
The zoning?
Zoning tells you what you can build on your land and how you can use it. The term zoning is derived from drawing zones on a map that define where different land uses are or are not allowed. Some land is zoned for heavy industry, which you usually don't want next to residences. A lot of land is zoned almost exclusively for single-family detached housing. Some zones are created primarily for commercial buildings, while other zones encourage a mix of uses that add to the vitality of town centers, or that encourage the right kind of development around transit stations. And some zones are created to preserve valuable natural resources, like Montgomery County's Agricultural Reserve.
Zoning determines what I can build on my property.
Hey lady, I think you're building that way too close to the property line. Zoning determines also what your neighbors can build on their property.
Zoning determines how tall buildings can be.
Zoning determines the parking requirements.
Zoning determines the type of businesses that you can have in your neighborhood, like this bookstore. Zoning regulates the size of your lot.
Zoning sets the density for all development.
Zoning establishes which uses require a public hearing and determines how much public review is required for something to be approved.
Zoning has an enormous impact on the way places look and feel. The right zone can protect or improve a neighborhood, revitalize a business district, or create usable and attractive open space. But zones can't guarantee those things. Landowners or developers are still free to build at any density and height they choose, as long as it's within the limits set by the local zoning code. Here's a good example. This place is right next to a metro stop, and it's zoned for buildings as tall as the one that's behind me. But this developer decided to build smaller and lower. And the zoning code allows that by right. So what's here is this single-story writing.
This is the old Safeway in Wheaton, in the CBD 3 zone. It was built in 1968 according to the market conditions of the time. This is a rendering of the proposed new Safeway. It reflects current market conditions, but the zoning is the same for both buildings.
Now that we've gone over the basics of zoning, let's take a look at a common zone to illustrate how zoning works. R90 is a common single-family detached residential zone in Montgomery County. In the R90 zone, there is a required minimum lot size of 9,000 square feet with a minimum lot width of 75 feet. So your lot could be 75 feet by 120 feet, a 95-foot square, or anything larger than that. For flag lots at the existing or proposed street line, the minimum lot width is 25 feet. Generally, building lines have to be parallel to lot lines, so you can't get too artsy. And there are setbacks, so you have to build at least 30 feet back from the street, with a minimum of 8 feet on either side of your house, although the total of the side setbacks has to add to 25, and you can't be any closer than 25 feet to the rear of the lot. The R90 zones also state that no more than 30% of the lot may be covered by buildings. The current code is not always that clear, though, which is one of the reasons for the rewrite project. This is how height is defined in the R90 zone. The height must not exceed 35 feet when measured to the highest point of the roof surface, regardless of roof type, or 30 feet to the mean height level between the eaves and ridge of a gable hip, mansard, or gambrel roof, subject to the following. The height must not exceed 2.5 stories, or 30 or 35 feet, depending on the method of measurement, if other lots on the same side of the street and in the same block are occupied by buildings with a height the same or less than this requirement. The height may be increased to 3 stories or 40 feet if approved by the planning board through the site plan approval procedures. So that's how a zone works.
So why is Montgomery County revising its zoning code? Well, for one thing, the code hasn't been comprehensively rewritten since 1977, and a lot has changed in the county since then. Also, the current zoning code is 1,152 pages long. You need a team of lawyers to figure out what you can and cannot do with your property. Since 1977, the number of zones has tripled from 41 to over 120 today, with over 400 land uses specified. There are currently 12 types of office uses listed, and we probably don't need that many distinctions, since office impacts are generally pretty similar.
In this discussion about zoning, it's important to remember that the zoning flows from a broader vision. In this case, the broad vision for Montgomery County evolved since the 1960s as the Wedges and Corridors Plan, which then manifests itself in more specific neighborhood-based planning studies, such as the one council recently passed for this area called White Flint. Those local visions are translated on the ground by what the local zoning then does and how building permits are issued in conformance with those local zoning rules. We only have about 4% of the land area in Montgomery County left that can be built on for the kind of development we've seen in the past, which is tract housing going in clear fields. But we do have about 7,400 acres of surface parking lots or commercial areas on very busy streets with strip malls. And when we start to think about where the zoning rewrite can help us develop in the future, it really is surface parking and strip development. And to have these discussions, the planning department has had about 70 meetings in the public so far in the zoning rewrite, and lots more are coming, to gauge what Montgomery County residents are thinking about what they would like to see in areas like this. And it's an opportunity for the zoning code to look at sustainable development in the future, about taking hard asphalted surfaces and turning them into something better.
For information on how to get involved, along with
So everyone just understanding the zoning is very comprehension understanding, but you have to be understanding keeping the zoning is important to making the more habitable city. Okay, so but we have to be understanding how we find out some information about the zoning. Every city has their own website, and then you simply access this zoning website to find out the zoning information. So I just bring the San Francisco zoning map. So also West Des Moines and Des Moines also has an own website to find out. So let's watch the zoning, the San Francisco Planning Department zoning map here. So this is more about interacting the based map here. So when you find out the city here, and then you find out your property, the first one. So when you want to build your project in this location, for example, this is a lot here. So you want to build your project is locating at this property. Simply you click that, and you see the property line, and then you find out all different information here. So simply zoning information, you click that, and then you find it indicating the every single requirement to keeping your idea. So first one, you can also see the bulk size, which is the 55, means you can build your project up to 55 feet. But when you click this orange mark, you can see more detailed information you can find out. So it means when you're designing your massing, you have to be keeping this all information. Okay, so if you not follow this information, you cannot admit the site permit from the department. So it means be very careful how you actually design the massing, basically from the zoning map. Okay. So, a second. Also, West Des Moines. It's a zoning map for the West Des Moines. You can just kind of find out the different color, which is the different zoning. So which is a green one, you can see the nature preserved space, which is the park, and then you can see the blue is more about commercial zone, yellow is more about the residential zone. So it means the city actually defined and divide some this zoning depending on the program. So it means you're making the more about the habitable and better city we live. Okay, so that's why you have to be respect the policy to making the better design. Okay, and then next one,